So now we're going to talk about linear functions and about function notation. So you know that y equals negative 2x minus 1 actually is a function, because if you were to make a table of values and then graph it, you would see that it's a function. You could do the vertical line test on it and see that it's a function. But we also want to know how to write this function in function notation. And function notation is just a fancy way of saying instead of the letter y, I'm actually going to write f of x here. So instead of y equals negative 2x minus 1, I'm going to write f of x is equal to negative 2x minus 1. And you know, they can switch this around. It doesn't necessarily have to say f of x. It can actually say g of x is equal to negative 2x minus 1. And this kind of means the same thing. It just means y equals negative 2x minus 1. They just like to swap out the terms. Sometimes they call it f of x. Sometimes they call it g of x. For now, you can just think of it as just another way of saying y. Now, a linear function, that's a very specific thing. So when you talk about a linear function, you're talking about a very specific type of function. It's actually a function that can be written in the format y is equal to mx plus b. Or, you know, if we just talked about function notation, you can also write it in the format f of x is equal to mx plus b, where the m and the b are constants. So they're numbers. And that's it. That basically makes it a linear function. And so you're going to have problems where they ask you, tell me whether this is a linear function or not. And so those are pretty easy. Let's look at an example. So let's say you have this function, f of x is equal to negative x squared minus 2x plus 7. And you have another function, g of x is equal to 5x plus 8. And the question is, tell me whether each of these is a linear function or not. And so how do you do that? Well, first step, go back to the definition of a linear function. Basically, it says a linear function has to follow this format. F of x equals mx plus b, where m and b are constants. So if you look at this first one, this could be like mx plus b, right? But this first part here, this exponent, x to the power of 2, that's not included in the definition of a linear function. So if you ever see an exponent like x to the power of 2, x to the power of 3, basically anything bigger than just x, you know that it's not a linear function. And if you graph it, you would not get a line. Linear function basically means no exponents, and when you graph it, you'll get a line. So we're going to eliminate this one, not a linear function. Let's try the second one. So in the second one, you kind of get mx plus b. And so the b could be 8, the m could be 5, and so yes, that is a linear function because it follows the format mx plus b.